Okay, we're going to have a little lesson on active and passive verbs. So what's the difference between an active and a passive verb? Let's look at some examples. Here's an active sentence. We call this animal a penguin. And here's a passive sentence. This animal is called a penguin. Do these have the same meaning? Yes, they do. So the active and passive can have the same meaning, even though they look a little different. Let's look at another example. Here's an active sentence. People use this to open bottles. So we have an active sentence when people is the subject, the verb is use, and then this is the object. What about a passive sentence with this? This is used to open bottles. You see the subject now is this, and there's no people. So we've taken the object, this, made it the subject. This is used to open bottles. Is it the same meaning? Yes, it is. Another example. We need a new start. That's the active sentence. And the passive is a new start is needed. Again, it's the same meaning. Let's look at another one. For my birthday, my friend surprised me with a party. In this active sentence, I want to mention my friends. So I say, my friend surprised me with a party. But in a passive sentence, notice that I don't mention who did it. I don't mention my friends. For my birthday, I was surprised with a party. I don't know who did it. Maybe my friends did it. Maybe my family. It's not mentioned in the passive. Here's another one. We often use the active with inventions. The Wright brothers invented the airplane. We can see this passive now is in the past tense, but it's still just a normal active sentence with the subject, verb, and an object. What about the passive? The airplane was invented by the Wright brothers. So this is a passive sentence. It's also past. I can see it's past because of this verb, was invented. But now we have the airplane at the front of the sentence, at the beginning. The airplane is now the subject. The airplane was invented by the Wright brothers. It's the same meaning. So we can form a passive sentence in any tense. It can be present, past, future, present continuous, any tense. But it's going to look a little different. A passive sentence can be formed in any tense. Again, these have the same meaning. So why do we use the passive? Well, sometimes we use the passive when you don't know who did something. So the example, my car was stolen last week. I don't know who stole it. My car was stolen, talking about the car, but who stole it? I don't know. So that's one reason we use the passive. You don't know who did it. Another reason you use the passive is you don't want to say who did it. Maybe because who did it is not important, or you just don't want to mention it. So here's an example. Mistakes were made. That's a passive sentence. Who made the mistake? Not me. Don't look at me. So because I made the mistake, I don't want to mention that I made it. So I can just use the passive. Mistakes were made by somebody. Here's another reason we use the passive. Sometimes we use the passive because the object is the important part of the sentence, not the subject, not the one who did it. Sometimes the object is the important part. So here's an example. Lena was born in 1998. You've seen this passive before, but maybe you didn't know it was a passive sentence. We have the be verb was and the born, the past passive participle. Lena was born in 1998. What's important in this sentence? Well, Lena, of course. So we use the passive. The other question, of course, is how do we make a passive sentence? Or how is a passive sentence made? Well, we need a be verb. So a be verb can be the verb be, is, am, are, was, were, and been. So you can see all of these different tenses, but we need that be verb. Plus, we need another verb. And this verb is called the PP. Some people call it the past participle. Some people call it the passive participle, but it's the PP. So it's not the past tense, it's the PP. So a verb like eat, ate, eaten, stole, stolen, stolen, worn, written. These are all PPs. It can be the irregular verb, can be the PP, or it can be a regular verb that ends with ed, like used, 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 want, wanted, wanted, and so on. So you need both. You need the be verb and you need a past participle. Here's an example. This animal, here's the subject, here's the be verb, is, here's the PP, called a penguin. This animal is called a penguin. The other thing we do when we make a passive is we take the object. So look at this sentence. We call this animal a penguin. This animal is the object. So in an active sentence, we have an object, but for a passive sentence, we will move that object to the front, to the subject position. This animal is called a penguin. Again, it's the same meaning, but one is active and this one is passive. So you know how to do it, right? Now, one thing to remember with passives, you cannot use an intransitive verb with a passive. An intransitive means a verb does not take an object. So let's look at some examples of intransitive verbs. The full moon was appeared. Appeared is an intransitive verb. There's no object after appeared. So you cannot say, I appeared the moon, but we can say the moon appeared. So we cannot make it a passive. Here's another example. The accidents happened too much. You cannot say are happened. Happen is an intransitive verb, does not take an object. Here's another example. I agreed with you, not I am agreed. And war is occurred too often. No, war occurs too often, or occurred too often, if you want to use the past. One more wrong example. That idea seemed wrong. You cannot say was seemed. So all of these verbs appeared, happened, agreed, occurred, and seemed are intransitive verbs, meaning they cannot take an object. It's just a subject and a verb. So again, let's look at the right way to say these. The full moon appeared. The accidents happened too much. I agree with you. War occurs too often. That idea seemed wrong. So only use active voice with these verbs. That's the end of the basic passive lesson. So keep your eyes open to see passive verbs. Look for that be verb, look for the PP, and look for the object to be in the subject position. And you will see passives everywhere.